Okay, picture this. Imagine Tom, right? He's sitting in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, just staring at the front doors of his office building.
Uh-huh.
Inside, there's this crucial board meeting happening any second now. It's supposed to decide his promotion. I mean, this is the culmination of like 3 years of just relentless grinding, late nights, everything.
Wow, yeah. High stakes.
Totally. But then his phone buzzes. It's a text from a colleague, and it says something like, just heard Daniel is also up for the same role. He's got connections upstairs.
Oh, man. That gut punch.
Exactly. That feeling, right? All that work. And now suddenly it feels like maybe it just comes down to these unseen forces, like the whole thing is rigged. For a second, Tom actually thought about just driving home.
I bet. It's that moment of despair.
But he didn't. He took a deep breath, switched off his phone, and walked in. And, that moment, it really captures something profound.
What is it that separates people in that situation?
Yeah, what truly separates those who kind of break under that kind of intense, seemingly unfair pressure from those who somehow manage to break through. And here's the kicker, and the guide we're digging into today makes this really clear. It's not talent, it's definitely not luck, and it's certainly not about having more advantages.
Right. What Tom, in that moment, sort of instinctively tapped into, and what a lot of these high-performing individuals really cultivate, is an inner framework.
An inner framework.
Exactly. So today, we're diving into this really powerful set of ideas, a kind of distillation of the strategies we're calling the Operator's Guide to Inner Mastery.
Okay, the Operator's Guide to Inner Mastery. I like that.
Think of it as like the ultimate playbook for mastering your internal world. We'll call these people operators during this deep dive. These are individuals who consistently achieve lasting success. And it's not just about external tactics. It's about mastering their internal systems, building that mental toughness before they desperately need it.
Building it beforehand. That sounds key. What I'm really excited to explore today is how this operator's guide seems to promise a shortcut, maybe not an easy one, but a shortcut to resilience, sharper insights, disciplined action, all coming from within. Okay, let's unpack this guide and see what this inner work really means for navigating, well, this complex world we're in.
Let's do it.
So let's start right at the foundation. Cultivating a genuinely bulletproof mindset. Now, when most people hear that phrase, bulletproof mindset, they often jump straight to, just think positive.
Right, the classic misunderstanding.
Yeah, but the guide we're looking at today suggests that's, well, not quite right. It's a pretty common misunderstanding of what a real bulletproof mindset actually involves.
Precisely. And what this guide highlights is really fascinating. A bulletproof mindset isn't just about slapping on positive thoughts. It's about consciously building these really robust mental frameworks.
Frameworks that hold up under pressure.
Exactly. Frameworks that don't just work when things are sunny, but actually kick in and function when everything seems to be going wrong.
Yeah.
The strongest operators, they follow these clear internal rules that actively guide their thinking. For instance, they default to positivity.
Okay.
But not because they're naive or blindly optimistic. It's actually a strategic redirection of their mental energy. Optimistic thinking literally trains their brains to seek solutions. It builds new neural pathways instead of just reinforcing those old ruts of despair or complaint.
Just active, not passive.
Very active. And when they face setbacks, so their very first question is always something like, okay, what can I learn from this? Not that, common lament, ugh, why does this always happen to me?
That's a big shift.
Huge. And they also fully accept their current reality. Like, completely. Instead of wasting precious mental energy, wishing things were different, if only this hadn't happened, they channel all that energy into working with what they actually have right now.
Dealing with the cards you're dealt.
Exactly. And crucially, they understand the profound difference between feelings and facts. Feelings, the guide points out, are kind of like weather, constantly changing, often unreliable guides for major decisions.
Yeah, unpredictable.
Totally. So instead of letting every emotional squall, dictate their course, operators learn to detach a bit. They learn to trust the version of themselves who could think clearly when they were making the plan over the emotional self that might, in the heat of the moment, just want to bail or take the easy way out.
So trusting your planning self over your panicked self.
You got it. It's about building this steadfast mental anchor in the storm, right? It lets you act with intention, with purpose, rather than just reacting to everything.
That makes sense.
In all these mental frameworks, they converge to create something incredibly powerful. The ability to act regardless of how you feel. That single skill. That's what truly separates these operators from, Well, almost everyone else who waits to feel motivated or waits for the perfect conditions.
That's a really powerful distinction, acting regardless of feeling. But, for someone listening who's genuinely struggling with motivation, maybe feeling overwhelmed, how does the guide suggest they actually start building that muscle, especially when that emotional self is just screaming to take the easy way out?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Mm.
And the guide suggests starting small, focusing on process over outcome, and building those systems we'll talk about later. It's not about a sudden transformation, but gradual reinforcement.
Okay, starting small. We'll definitely circle back to that. So we've talked about building that solid inner mindset, but what happens when that inner fortress, encounters its own weak spots, like self-doubt or seeing your own shortcomings? How do operators take those things and turn them into fuel for growth?
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. The guide draws this critical distinction between having an inferiority complex and experiencing an inferiority feeling. They sound similar, but they're worlds apart.
Okay, complex versus feeling. What's the difference?
An inferiority complex, it basically says, I'm inherently not good enough, therefore I can't do this. It's rigid, it's limiting, it acts like a permanent stop sign in your head.
Right, like a label you stick on yourself.
Exactly. But an inferiority feeling,
Mm.
that says something different. It says, okay, I'm not good enough yet, so here's specifically what I need to work on. See the difference? It's dynamic.
Mm.
It's a roadmap, an active call to action to improvement.
Wow, okay. So one's a dead end, the other's a starting point.
Precisely. And this simple but really profound shift in thinking, it unlocks what psychologists often call a growth mindset. That core belief that your abilities aren't fixed entities, but they can be developed through dedication, through hard work.
The growth mindset. Yeah, I've heard of that.
But the guide points out it goes even deeper than just believing you can improve. It means actively using the discomfort of not being where you want to be as motivation to systematically close those gaps. You lean into the discomfort.
Leaning into the discomfort. That's a really transformative way to look at what most of us see as weaknesses. So, practically, instead of seeing someone more skilled and thinking, why am I so bad at this? The operator asked.
They ask, okay, what specific skills does that person have that I can break down and start developing myself? They genuinely don't see superior performance as a threat to their ego.
They see it as a roadmap.
Exactly, a roadmap for their own improvement.
Yeah.
But you raised a good point earlier. Isn't there a risk here? Constantly comparing, trying to catch up based on others?
Hmm.
Could that lead to burnout or, comparison fatigue? How does the guide address that, making sure this doesn't just become a race you feel you can never win?
Yeah, that seems like a potential trap.
It is, and the guide tackles it directly. It's crucial that it's not about this endless, vague comparison. It's about identifying specific, actionable skills. Not just they're better, but they handle objections this specific way, or their presentation structure is really effective.
Specific.
Specifics. And this targeted approach actually creates a positive feedback loop in your brain. So your brain is designed to reward progress, however small. So as you make progress toward these specific skill goals, it releases dopamine, that feel-good chemical.
Yeah, the brain chemistry.
Right. It literally trains your brain to seek out more of those small wins, reinforcing the behavior. So the key here, the guide emphasizes, is breaking down big challenges into smaller, manageable pieces.
Makes sense.
It's not just about making daunting tasks seem less scary. It's about systematically hacking your brain's own reward system.
Hmm.
So, don't focus on the overwhelming goal of losing 50 pounds. Focus on eating one healthy meal today.
One meal today. Got it.
Don't obsess about building $1 million company from scratch. Focus on making one sale this week. It builds momentum.
That feels much more achievable. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. This idea that what feels like a weakness, that inferiority feeling, might not just be something to overcome, but could actually become your rocket fuel for growth. How does that connection work? Let's dive into that.
It's about harnessing that gap, that feeling of not yet, as pure motivational energy.
Okay, so once you've shored up your inner resilience, maybe started turning those weaknesses into fuel, how do you then navigate the tricky external world? Especially, the subtle signals in human interaction. That brings us to what the guide calls the edge, the art of truly reading people. While most of us get caught up in just the words people say, what are operators really paying attention to?
Yeah, this is crucial. Operators pay attention to what people actually communicate, which, as you said, often goes way beyond just the words they use. The guide highlights 5 key signals that most people tend to miss entirely.
5 signals. Okay, what are they?
Things like subtle shifts in someone's voice tone when they hit on an important or sensitive topic, or mismatches between their words and their underlying body language. Like someone saying yes enthusiastically, but subtly pulling back physically.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. The yes, but.
Exactly. Or those fleeting microexpressions, maybe a flicker of disgust or contempt that flashes across their face when they're delivering information they don't actually believe in themselves.
Micro expressions. Wow. Hard to catch.
Very hard, but very revealing. Also, unusual pauses or hesitations in the natural flow of conversation that can signal discomfort or deception. And even specific timing patterns, like consistently delaying answers on certain subjects. These are all subtle cues, but when you start noticing them, they offer this incredible roadmap to deeper understanding.
It's like learning a new language almost.
In a way, yes. And beyond just those signals, the best operators understand something called the warmth versus competence dynamic.
Warmth versus competence. Explain that.
Well, basically, some people respond primarily to warmth. They want to feel connected, inspired, liked. Others respond more to competence. They want facts, data, proof of expertise. They want to be informed.
Ah, okay. Different motivational drivers.
Exactly. And the ability to quickly get a read on which type you're dealing with allows you to tailor your approach for much better results.
Right.
Whether you're, making a sales pitch, negotiating a contract, or even just trying to have a difficult conversation with a colleague or family member.
That makes a lot of sense. And just to be really clear here, the guide stresses this isn't about being manipulative, right? It's not about tricking people.
Absolutely not. That's a critical distinction. The guide frames it as a way of creating genuine connection by understanding how people prefer to communicate and be understood. It's actually about building trust because people subconsciously sense when you're truly paying attention to them, their signals, their preferred style, not just bulldozing ahead with your own agenda or only listening to their words.
Right. People feel seen. So how does developing this, let's call it tactical empathy,
Right.
how does that actually translate into, say, stronger relationships or more confident decision-making in the real world?
Well, it creates this kind of compound effect over time. You become more confident in your decisions because you're picking up on signals and information that others are missing. This lets you anticipate reactions better, maybe even uncover hidden agendas or unspoken concerns.
Okay, better foresight.
Definitely. And you build stronger, more resilient relationships because people feel genuinely understood by you, which is a really powerful fundamental human need. And finally, you develop what negotiation experts often call tactical empathy.
Tactical empathy.
Yeah, there's the ability to understand and even articulate the other person's perspective clearly, accurately, even if you completely disagree with it. Just showing you get where they're coming from often disarms them and opens the door for actual problem solving and genuine connection rather than just conflict.
That sounds like a superpower in difficult conversations. Okay, moving on. We live in this culture that's just obsessed with speed, with hacks, with instant gratification. How do operators cultivate what the guide calls the discipline? That sustained effort that's clearly necessary for any real mastery? What's the fundamental truth about achievement that maybe many of us have forgotten?
Yeah, the guide is really unequivocal on this point. It states plainly, mastery requires sustained, disciplined effort over time. Period. There are absolutely no shortcuts to anywhere worth going.
No shortcuts. Ouch. But probably true.
It's a truth that echoes through history, doesn't it? You find it very clearly in the teachings of figures like Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary samurai warrior. His timeless principle was simply, the way is in training.
The way is in training? Simple but profound.
Profoundly simple, profoundly difficult. What it means practically is showing up consistently, day after day, regardless of how you feel, whether you're motivated or not. It means consciously choosing difficulty over comfort, because that friction, that challenge, that's precisely where the real growth happens.
Choosing difficulty. That goes against every instinct sometimes.
It does. And Musashi also had this deep understanding of impermanence. He knew that everything in life, our successes, our failures, relationships, everything, it's all temporary. It comes and goes.
That sounds a bit bleak, maybe.
It can sound that way initially, but the implication isn't to care less. It's actually the opposite. It's about developing the emotional resilience to accept change, to accept loss when it comes without being completely destabilized by it. And paradoxically, that acceptance frees up enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy you can then pour into what you can actually control, your actions, your training, your effort right now.
Okay, so acceptance frees up energy. I can see
Right.
that. And the modern applications for this ancient wisdom seem pretty clear, right? Things like structured daily practices that systematically build that mental discipline muscle.
Exactly. We're talking about things like really intentional morning routines that set the tone for the day, or evening reviews where you don't just crash, but actively extract the key lessons from the day's experiences, good and bad.
Learning from the day.
And even just simple, consistent habits. Maybe it's meditating for 5 minutes, maybe it's 1 hour of focused work before checking email that seems small individually, but they compound over time into extraordinary results.
The power of compounding applied to habits.
Precisely. And this whole approach, it fundamentally reframes what discipline even means. The guide argues it's not about forcing yourself white-knuckled to do things you hate. That's a recipe for burnout.
Yeah, that sounds exhausting.
It is. Instead, the guide defines discipline as building systems that make the right choices, the productive choices, more or less automatic. So you don't have to rely solely on your limited willpower when it really matters most. Think of it like automating your success habits, rather than constantly battling yourself.
Automating success. I like the sound of that. Okay, final piece of the puzzle from the guide, the transmission. How operators influence outcomes, build those strong relationships we talked about, often through the power of stories. Why are stories so fundamental, so baked into how we humans process reality and make decisions?
It really goes back to our fundamental brain wiring. The guide puts it simply. Our brains are wired for narrative. It seems to be our default mode for making sense of the world.
Wired for narrative.
Yeah, we naturally turn experiences, data, everything into stories. Stories with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Usually with ourselves cast as the main character. It's not just a fun quirk. It seems to be how we effectively process complex information, how we remember what truly matters, and crucially, how we transmit knowledge, values, and culture across generations.
So it's like our operating system.
Pretty much. And the guide points out that the most powerful, most memorable stories almost always tap into one or more of three core human drives. Our drive for survival, our drive for connection, and our drive for status or significance. Stories that address those deep needs, they really stick with people. They motivate action because they resonate on a primal emotional level.
Survival, connection, status. Okay. And it's not just the stories you tell other people, is it? The guide makes a strong point about the stories you tell yourself. How do those shape your identity and ultimately your actions?
Oh, massively. The internal narrative is huge. When you consciously choose to reframe a challenge, say, instead of seeing it as a terrifying threat, you frame it as an interesting opportunity for growth. It literally changes how your brain chemistry processes that situation.
How so?
Well, it can shift you out of a defensive fight or flight mode, which is very limiting, into a more adaptive, curious, problem-solving mode. You access different parts of your brain. So the story you tell yourself about the situation directly impacts your physiological and psychological response, and therefore your actions,
That's powerful. So how do operators use storytelling strategically in their interactions?
in several ways. They craft compelling narratives, maybe about the future, to help their teams visualize success and really understand their crucial role in achieving that shared vision. They use personal stories, often showing vulnerability, carefully chosen to build trust and connection much faster than just presenting facts would. It humanizes them and their message.
Makes them relatable.
Exactly. And they become incredibly skilled at reframing setbacks. They don't let a failure be the definitive end of the story. Instead, they frame it as a plot twist, an unexpected challenge in an ongoing narrative of progress. This helps maintain momentum, belief, and learning.
A plot twist, not an ending. I like that reframing.
It's powerful. And ultimately, the guide makes this profound point. Identity is essentially a collection of stories.
Yeah.
The stories you choose to tell yourself and tell others about who you are, what you've overcome, what you stand for. By consciously choosing which stories to emphasize and reinforce, you can actually shape who you become over time, and certainly how others perceive you.
Wow. Identity is a collection of stories. So, okay, we've explored these 5 key areas. Cultivating that bulletproof mindset, the kind of alchemy of transforming inferiority into actual fuel for growth, gaining that edge by truly reading people, harnessing the quiet power of sustained discipline, and then the profound impact of storytelling and narrative. Bringing all 5 of these elements together, it feels clear they create something, I don't know, far greater than just the sum of their individual parts.
Absolutely. And this entire approach, as it's laid out in the guide, it's really built for reality, not some fantasy. It doesn't promise you a life without problems or challenges.
Right. It's not about avoiding difficulty.
Not at all. In fact, it explicitly assumes you will face setbacks, you will deal with difficult people, you will encounter unexpected, sometimes painful challenges, and yes, sometimes you'll feel like quitting. These frameworks aren't designed for perfect laboratory conditions. They're designed for the messy, complicated world we actually live in.
That's reassuring, actually.
It is. This is what the guide means by operator-level thinking. It's practical, it's been tested in the trenches, and it's relentlessly focused on achieving results in the real world with all its imperfections.
And the guide talks about this transformation that occurs, right? It's not overnight, but almost like a gradual then sudden shift. You start making subtly better decisions because you're reading situations and people more clearly.
Yeah, the inputs improve.
You bounce back from setbacks faster, maybe more intelligently, because your mental frameworks are stronger, allowing you to learn and adapt instead of just getting knocked down.
Resilience increases.
You build deeper, more effective, maybe more authentic relationships because you understand how people really communicate beyond the surface level. And ultimately, you achieve bigger, more meaningful goals because you've learned how to break them down and, crucially, how to show up consistently day in, day out.
That's the path. And the ultimate outcome, the destination, perhaps, that the guide calls inner mastery, it boils down to this: the ability to control your internal responses, regardless of external circumstances.
Control your responses, not the circumstances.
Precisely. That is presented as the ultimate operator skill. Everything else, peace of mind, strategic action, effective leadership, lasting impact, it all flows from that core ability.
Which brings us right back to Tom in his car, staring at those office doors. That feeling of the deck being stacked against him. The difference, the guide argues, between operators who break under that pressure and those who break through. It really isn't the obvious stuff like raw talent or luck or having some inherent advantage.
No, it's the frameworks. It's the internal systems they've diligently built and follow, especially when everything seems to be going wrong.
When the pressure is highest.
That's when it counts. And the guide's most powerful takeaway, I think, is the urgency of building these frameworks now proactively before you desperately need them in a crisis. That's the real advantage, being prepared internally.
Preparation is key. So, for everyone listening, your current situation, whatever it is, it's not your final destination. It can't be. But it is your starting point. After diving deep into this operator's guide to inner mastery, maybe ask yourself, what's the one framework, just one insight from today's deep dive that you'll begin to consciously build or reinforce starting right now?
A great question to end on. And as Musashi would wisely remind us, the way is in training. The work starts now.